What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Office Hour Tangents, where I typically come from class straight to here and talk about the tangents that I went on in class. This is summertime, so I don't have any on-ground classes this summer. I am teaching a couple classes online, but this is not an office hours, and this is not a tangent, so to speak. But it is something that continues to be interesting to me. And, and it revolves around most of the discussions. So most of the technology discussions going on whenever I get into coffee shop discussions or, corner discussions, anything having to do with technology right now, people are just talking about AI. I'm almost getting tired of talking about AI, but I can't get tired of talking about AI because we're just at the beginning point of this revolution, right? So I continue to have thoughts behind it, and I'm continuing my thought process behind this idea of us kind of the dopeness living between the lines, right? I did my previous podcast, I think it's called Between the Lines or something like that, and I'm kind of continuing with that thought process. So if we think about AI and how I'm thinking about AI, I'm thinking about AI on the lines, right? And I'm thinking about where we are and where we reside. I think what we do is on the lines. I think what we create is on the lines. I think where we live, what we breed, all that stuff. I guess you can consider it on the lines. But I'm thinking where the opportunities may present themselves going down the line are in between these lines. Are in between and underneath these lines. Like what resides kind of in there. And where AI is going to have a difficult time touching. I say difficult time because I don't know what AI is going to do going forward. But right now, I feel like it can't touch the soul. It can't touch love. It can't touch creativity, all that good stuff, right? It could just regurgitate. So when I'm thinking about these lines, I'm thinking about boring. I'm thinking about data. I'm thinking about data arrays. I'm thinking about algorithms. I'm thinking about code. I'm thinking about IBM. I'm thinking about gray. I'm thinking about blue. I'm thinking about white and black. I'm thinking about if AI and technology, if we're in this technological revolution, I think at the end of this revolution, the world is just going to look grayer. I just believe that. It's going to be more proficient. The technology is going to be way more amazing. We might even have flying cars. I don't know. But they're going to be gray flying cars, as evidenced by all the Teslas down here. So many Teslas down here, it's almost all Teslas look alike. I don't care what the model of the Tesla other than the Cybertruck, all of them look exactly alike. Okay? And that's how I kind of see the future looking if we kind of continue to rely on AI to make our decisions, right? Because the safe decision is gray. The safe decision is blue. It's kind of like a home when you get your home painted, knowing that you're going to eventually flip it or rent it out or something. You're just going to make the walls like the color of these walls, like off-white. You're gonna color your house like a grayish, mauve, like brownish, safe color that's not going to offend anybody. We're just going to have more of that because that's how AI is going to interpret. It has to, work for the masses. The masses, nobody hates blue, so let's make it blue. Okay? And nobody is against gray. Let's make it gray. Let's keep it safe, right? But I really believe that inside of these, in between these lines, is some amazing stuff. I think AI is going to contribute to creating some of this dopeness, right? But this is how do we do that? And I think how we're going to do that is using creative thinking, design thinking, right? Now, design thinking has a process, and I'm using design thinking more and more in my classrooms. I'm using design thinking more and more in just everything I kind of do. Because I think thinking is going to be paramount in this new technological age, right? Because AI can't think yet. Okay, so the design thinking process, of course, you define the problem, you empathize with the user, you ideate, meaning you brainstorm and you come up with ideas, and then you create the idea that kind of percolates to the top. And then once you create a prototype or MVP or something like that, then you test it. Okay, then you see if it works, and then you learn from the test. And then you iterate, and then you test it again, and you iterate, right? So that's the general design thinking process. But I'm a hip hop head. So I was thinking, like, what in history that I am interested in kind of utilize the design thinking process to create, like, something super dope. And when I was thinking about the creation of hip hop, being that, we're in the 50th anniversary year of hip hop. And I was like, Eureka, hip hop was definitely created between these lines using a lot of parts of the design thinking process, whether they knew it or not. Okay. And if you haven't watched, there's a show on Netflix called The Get Down, which is dope. If you haven't seen The Get Down on Netflix, I encourage you to watch it, whether you're a fan of hip hop or not. It kind of like chronicles, but in a fictional manner, the founding of hip hop, like a very, very fictional and dramatic manner. But it has a lot of the elements of it in it. And I encourage you to watch that movie, the show To Get Down, at least the first season. And it'll kind of mesh with what I'm about to start talking about. So back in the day, there was a guy named DJ Kool Herc. A lot of people credit him with founding hip hop, if there was like anybody that like founded hip hop. And he used to throw parties, like parties in the park, parties in the rec center, and he would bring his turntables to spin records. But he would notice that when he was spinning a certain record, the party's kind of going, but then at the breakdown, or some people call it the get down, or just the dope part of the song. Sometimes it's the chorus, or it's just the break beat. At a certain part of the record, everybody got out their seat and started rocking, right? And then he was like, okay, how can I continue this one part that might be 5 seconds, it might be 10 seconds, it might be 20 seconds, but how can I continue this one part on this record? Because the record just keeps on playing. You can't rewind records. You can't, you got to pick the needle up and place it back. So he came up with an ingenious method to get two of the same record and kind of mark the record so he knows exactly where the party wants in, and he can juggle between these two records to continue the dope part of the track. And he can continue that dope part for as long as he needed the party to keep rocking. Okay? And another DJ named Grandmaster Flash kind of perfected that technique. And he's accredited a lot of times as like, he's definitely one of the founding pioneers of hip hop. But he's credited as actually taking what Kool Herc started and kind of like mastering this method of juggling break beats. And I think they use the design thinking process to come up with this technique, to kind of birth what we know now as hip hop. So they had a problem. Their problem was, how can we continue this break beat continuously in a jam? Okay. They empathized with the user. The users were disenfranchised, inner city youth that were just trying to kick it, but they weren't finding the traditional music to be really for them. They were using it. They were rocking to it. At the time it was jazz. It was a lot of disco. It was R&B. It was soul, things like that, even rock and roll. But that didn't really speak to this youth in the inner city, right? So they empathized. They were part of that user base, and they lived amongst the user base. So they empathized with the user, and then they ideated, right? They came up with ideas. They brainstormed to. I won't say they brainstormed, but the ideas they came up with is what I already mentioned was, hey, I can take two records and I can flip between the two of them, making up my own technique. Like this didn't exist before, and they figured out how to do it. Okay, and then they created something. They created that technique. They tested it. The test was the parties. The test was the jams. So they can try it out in their living room or their garage. But once they got to the jams, that was like the test. That was the minimum viable product. They would actually do their mixes and they would put it on a mixtape. That's like a product that they can sell at the jams. So they can see, is the jam rocking because of my technique? Yes. Cool. This worked. Okay. How about this one? Nope. Okay. Let's take that back to the lab. Are the tapes selling out? Cool. That minimum viable product is working. Okay. And then maybe record labels catch wind of like, hey, these guys are like, selling these mixtapes out the trunk and really doing something. Maybe we should see what they're doing and maybe put them on a major label and let's sell records that way. Right. I'm kind of jumping forward a little bit, but they kind of use this process to come up with the dopeness that is now called hip hop. So here's a demonstration of, DJ Babu. He's a really famous dope DJ, kind of demonstrating this technique of juggling. So if we talk about these lines, so in the future, these lines, if we kind of look around this, like I said and mentioned before, I feel like all the stuff that we can see are the lines, right? And we might not even recognize that there is an area between the lines. But how I see the lines are they're close together, and they almost look like just a big gray wall. But recognizing that there is in between because of science, nothing ever is completely touching, right? So if traditional music lives on the lines, meaning instrumentation, singing, all that good stuff, then DJs live between these lines. If traditional dance lived on the lines, meaning ballet, tap, jazz, the two-step, all that good stuff, then breakdancing lives between the lines. And if traditional art lives on the lines, meaning painting, sculpture, drawing, then graffiti art definitely lives between the lines, literally on train lines in New York City back in the day. And they were like moving billboards. Graffiti artists can put their art up and it could be seen by thousands and thousands of people for years and years, or maybe months and months until it gets washed off. But they were literally designing on the lines. They were waking up at 2, 3 in the morning and sneaking around and climbing things and risking their lives and risking their freedom to get their expression out there. And if MC traditionally means master of ceremony, in between these lines and what hip hop created, MC now means move the crowd. So this got me thinking. I started thinking about hip hop ciphers. The reason why I started thinking about hip hop ciphers was because when I started conducting design thinking exercises, whether in classrooms or with clients, I began to just think of them as a group. I would get a group of not like-minded individuals, but creative individuals, a diverse group of creative individuals trying to solve a problem, right? That's basically what a design thinking process is. And when you got a more diverse group of people, you got better results, right? And I was thinking, what's the big difference between this design thinking activity and a hip hop cipher? I feel like in a hip hop cipher, I was thinking in my head, it's a circle. Usually it forms kind of a circle of people, and somebody starts beatboxing, and then somebody starts rapping over the beatbox, right? It takes two people to start. Really, it takes one person to start rocking, and then it's kind of contagious. And then as it flows and it starts to go in different directions, dopeness just happens. You don't know what kind of dopeness is going to happen. And I felt like that. I feel like that about design thinking exercises. Now, the dopeness happens, but it happens in a more sterilized way. But I'm like, hey, I want my design thinking exercises to be a little more dope. And I think just opening up it, using music, using different entities beyond just traditional, sticky notes and brainstorms and telling a story. Maybe we can, have bars and we can have music. And, I think that open up different wavelengths of our mind to start figuring out where in between these lines are. Because even though on my graphic I have the lines being very straight and then in between the lines being very straight, but behind it is very chaotic. It's not like that. It's like you look around and how can we find these opportunities in between this sterilization, right? And only, certain people can kind of see this. And we see these people, sometimes we call them geniuses, sometimes we call them creatives, think Sly and the Family, think Sly from Sly and the Family Stone, think, John Lennon, think those people that just like come up with something crazy dope and you can't even imagine how they even came up with that. They kind of know how to figure out where the lines are and they don't want to be there. Right. So if you're ever thinking about like, hey, I just don't feel like I want to be here. Like, I don't feel like I fit in here. Sometimes you're searching for in between the lines. And I'm thinking that if you go through this design thinking process, even if it's by yourself, it'll help you maybe find these opportunity areas. So I was thinking if a design thinking activity is more like a cypher, like a hip hop cypher, then I think the design thinking activity can produce way doper solutions. Because in the cypher, sky's the limit. Sky's the limit in the cypher. So if you ever, reach out if you want to participate in one of my Cyphers. Like, I love doing Cyphers, just like I love doing ciphers. Like, reach out if you want to do a cipher, like a virtual cipher or something like that. But the Cypher is basically the design thinking activity with the interjection of hip hop sensibilities and elements. And it doesn't have to be hip hop. It's just like music or art or dance, or it's just something beyond, business casual, 9 to 5, come with your sticky notes type of thing. Okay, we're going to do that also. But we're going to, instead of maybe telling a story about a product, maybe we'll write a bar about a product, right? Instead of a ice-breaking activity, like, hey, what is this pencil type of thing? It's kind of like, hey, I'm going to start a beat. And then somebody join in. Let's get loosened up. Everybody's shy. Nah, I'm not starting until somebody starts rapping. I don't care if it rhymes or not. And let's go. And it loosens people up and it gets people to going, and it opens up these alternate pathways of discovery and creativity. And that's what the Cypher seeks to be. Okay? So, yeah, that's just my thoughts behind, my take on design thinking activities. And I think everybody can kind of do this and interject their own level of creativity and dopeness and sensibilities to make your design thinking activity more unique. Because the intent is to find what's popping between these sterilized lines that are continually being built, so we can see where the dopeness is. And I'm not an AI hater. I'm using AI every day, and it's allowing me to almost increase my creativity. But what I continue to see and hear in these conversations, or some of these conversations I'm having, is it's so amazing. Something that would take me 5 hours to do before is only taking me 30 seconds, right? So my question is, what are you going to do with your extra 5 hours? Okay? Like, what are you going to do with your extra 5 hours? Are you just going to do more work? So theoretically, the work you were producing in a 40-hour work week, now you're going to be able to produce 80 hours worth of work. That's what the corporations would love to happen. They would love it. But I'm just like, where's the dopeness come? You know, do something dope with that extra 5 hours. Do something creative, right? If you can accomplish what you need to get accomplished in a minute, use that extra time to find out what's between these lines. Explore. And I'm not saying like learn something new, learn a different language. Yeah, you can do all that too. But I'm like, you know, try to do something you never even thought about. I think that's where the dopeness is going to come. I think that may be the ultimate product that is developed from this AI revolution. Is that maybe we're embarking on the era of super dopeness and we don't even know it yet. Okay, so that's it. Thanks for listening, and until next time, peace.